Welcome, everybody. This is yet another beautiful session with a very beautiful person called Shaheen Mistri. I'm sure that somebody must have heard of her in this lifetime of the incredible work that she's doing. I just want to give a little bit of a back introduction to what this is all about. So it's a very special session of INKWomen. At INKWomen, we are going to spotlight women who are really helping to change the narrative. I've done something which is exceptional, done something which is truly inspiring. So we gather here to listen to the story of one such woman today, a woman who just didn't build organizations to but help ignite a movement around what education can and should look like in India. And we talk a lot about, how children are in the middle of all of this and how Shaheen beautifully spotlights every child. That is the foundation of India and, of course, how education is building them up. INKWomen features 49 powerful stories from across the country, each echoing the spirit of 49.6% of the world's population, that is women. And each one of them is a reminder on how representation is just not a number, but a narrative in itself. And today's narrative is one of purpose, persistence, and compassion, told through the I'm sorry, I'm like excited for it, so I'm missing words. Told through the extraordinary journey of Shaheen Mistri herself. So, Shaheen, at 18, you walked into the slums in Mumbai, hoping to volunteer, where you found that it wasn't just a classroom, it was your calling. With no blueprint, but just deep conviction, I know that you began Akanksha Foundation, creating a space where children from unserved or underdeserved communities could access quality education that didn't compromise on dignity, joy, and hope. And then, years later, from the same conviction, you created Teach for India. So, Shaheen, welcome. This is a 45-minute conversation between you and me. There are lots of women from the Hockey community who have joined. So, how we'll do it is that if there are any questions that come up from the community, I'm going to just pause and ask you in the middle of our conversation. I hope this is fine, and welcome again.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Lovely. So, of course, as they say, let's start from start. Shaheen, you walked into the slums when you just didn't even know what this journey might look like. So, tell us about your early days and, of course, why education? Why did you do what you did? And how did it all unfold into Akanksha?
That's a a big question.
Yeah.
No, firstly, it's lovely to be here. Thank you for this. And I feel I wish we could see all the women and that I could really hear and understand the questions on everyone's mind right now, but exciting to be able to share a little bit of the journey. I think the early days, like when people ask me, like, what's your story? I feel like I really don't have a very big story. For me, I never set out to build an organization. I didn't have a big vision or a big dream. I just realized very early on, from the age of 12, actually, that I loved being with children. And I realized very early on, also through very early volunteering experiences while I was in school, that something was very unequal in the world. And I think these two things slowly over time, through volunteering in summer vacations, through seeing, my mom was a speech therapist, so we had children often with multiple special needs in and out of our home. So there were lots of these little seeds that came together. But at 18, I think the other seed that came together was one of identity. I think I grew up in 5 different countries, 10 different schools, never lived in India. And so I was, I think, internally searching for where I really belonged. And so I felt a drawing to India, but I didn't know India at all. So all of these things, I think, came together at 18. I was on a trip just visiting family in India, and had cousins I was very close to. So we would come back usually every year. And on that particular trip, I just felt a very strong instinct in a particular moment, which I remember, like literally sitting in a black and yellow taxi, a few kids ran up to the window. I think this is an experience all of us have had at some point. But in that moment, an instinct said, like, stay in India and you can do something here. And so I think it was actually probably a combination of me searching for my identity, me feeling like I may want to do something with children, me understanding that the opportunities I'd grown up with were fundamentally different from a lot of the kids that I came into contact with. All those dots probably connected in that moment for me to say, wait a minute, let me pick up the phone, call my dad, tell him I'm not coming back to Tufts University, I'm dropping out of college and staying in India. So that's really how I started.
So how was this accepted? I mean, I'm really curious to know, how was it taken back at home?
Yeah, so I mean, mom and dad have always been the kind of parents who, like, we know exactly what they're thinking in terms of what they think is right or wrong. But at the same time, they never stopped my brother and I directly for things that we believed in. So I remember that conversation with my dad quite well because I was booked on a flight to go back to India 1 week later. I was supposed to enter my second year at Tufts University. And I called dad and I said, dad, I just don't want to come back. I want to be in India. And, he said, why don't you think about finishing college and coming, working for a few years, then going back to India. So he said those things. He also said that, look, the one condition is you need to get into a good college because you can't drop out of college, even if you're back in India. But he ultimately said, do what you think is right, you know? And so I think for me, I also say this often that for me as a young entrepreneur, I was very, very lucky. Like, yes, it was risky at 18 to do something like this, and people were doing different things. And at the same time, I had family that I knew they may not agree with what I was doing, but they would support me. And that made a huge difference. And I do think that, like, for women on this call and beyond as well, like cultivating the family and friends around who may think you're crazy, but at the same time will hold you and support you. I think that was a huge enabler in my journey, not just early on, but throughout.
So, okay, you started this journey, Akanksha came, and then a couple of years later, you also thought of doing Teach for India. How did that transition really take place? Was it something that it just by default happened? Because it is, of course, the next step to it, I would say, right?
Yeah.
Did you
Yeah.
consciously build it?
Yeah, so I'll speak a little bit about Akanksha and then the
Yes.
transition. So I think, Akanksha, I started when I was 18. It was like a small college project. First 5 years, we were all Xavier's college students. Really, the idea was that kids need to be educated. We have a lot of free time as college students. Let's go teach them. It was as simple as that. And I think those 17 years building Akanksha, first from an after-school model to an actual model where we were taking over government schools, running them with fundamentally different results, different pedagogy. That journey for me was 17 years of really learning more than anything else. I think I learned so much from my kids. And I think the more I fell in love with the kids I worked with, the more I went outside to learn the skills, the orientations, the values that I needed to be able to run the organization. So it
Got it.
really happened step by step, starting with like 15 kids in one classroom who I used to teach myself. At a time where, like, we didn't know what to do. Like, kids would come in and throw clay on the ceiling and hang out of the windows and run to the bathrooms and come back soaking wet. And so really those were like the early day moments of Akanksha, to really learning, like, and asking ourselves, what is an excellent education? What are the components of it? What do our children need? And step by step sort of working to develop a stronger and stronger program to be able to deliver on those needs for kids. So Akanksha grew from that one space with 15 kids to 60 after school centers to then By the time I left, I think we were at about 20 schools that we ran in partnership with the government. So that was Akanksha. And then I think the transition really happened 17 years later because of the success of Akanksha, interestingly. So Akanksha, our kids just did so much better than I think I ever dreamed was possible. So I didn't dream that children who were not able to read and write would one day be at Xavier's College, in the same college that I ended up at, or that they would
Women.
be able to like fundamentally change their communities, their families, like stand up for things that they believed in. So I think because I saw that, the question was, how do we do this at scale? Because at that time, Akanksha was still just reaching 4,000 kids. So the transition to Teach for India was really one of saying, since we know how powerful education can be, we've seen it with our own eyes, with our Akanksha children, how do we do this at scale? And so I was looking for a model that wouldn't compromise depth, because my big belief is that there is no silver bullet solution to education, that it's a deep process, it's a multi-year process. We think about your own children at home and the amount of help and support and the ups and downs that they go through to be able to reach their potential. So education is about depth, but you also need to find a model that scales. And I found that model in a program called Teach for America, which had
Oh,
started 10 years before Teach for India. And again, was a crazy idea. Wendy Kopp, who was the founder of Teach for America, was a student at Princeton University. And she said, I'm going to create an army of 500 Ivy League students who will choose to teach in the nation's most struggling schools for 2 years. The story goes that her Princeton professor like almost tore her thesis up, saying like, there's no way, like, why would you graduate from a Harvard or Princeton and go and teach in a public school? But she actually did that. And that idea that like, can we get our nation's best, brightest, most committed people into the development sector? Because if we do that, they are going to be leaders who are going to be able to solve arguably India's largest problems are our development sector problems. So that idea of leadership being pivotal is what I think made me transition to Teach for India.
so beautifully said. But at the same time, I want to ask you, what is education? Because you yourself did not do the formal education at 18 you were supposed to do, and you went into something which is teaching children and then Teach for India. So is formal education a degree really education? What is education when you say?
Yeah. I mean, firstly, I love the question because, like,
I don't know.
for me, the
It's
question is the question. It's like I keep asking myself and evolving my own understanding of the nuances of that question. Because really, I think what education has become over time in our country is this competitive race for marks, to really live the life that you want, right? Like as an individual. And I think while, of course, that is an important component of education, I think it's grossly insufficient. And I actually attribute many of the problems of our country and our world back to individual greed, right? Like we have not cared about others. We've not cared about the planet, the environment, the fact that people are equal to us. And I think a lot of that goes back to how we learn in school. And so really, to me, the evolving definition of education now is self others India. That's how I define it. By self, I mean, can education help you discover who you are, your strength,
Oh,
your history, your purpose, the life of your choice, the job that you want? So that's self. Other
mm,
is, can education do more than that? Can it help
mm,
you value others, listen to others, embrace differences, like be concerned not just about yourself, but unleashing the potential of those around you? Other is also about creating for each child a community of support around them. You know, life is difficult. Ultimately, we all know this, like what gets us through life is the community around us, that in stronger times we give to that community, in weaker times we take from that community. And finally, education is about India. And what I mean by India is it's about being a change maker for a better country and a better world. So can education teach us how to understand the problems around us, the social issues, like figure out what we want to change. Like we may be passionate about gender, we may be passionate about animal rights. It doesn't matter what we choose, but are we geared up to leaving the country and the world a little bit better than we inherited it? So to me, that's the expansive purpose of education. And I always feel like everything would change if school leaders at the beginning of the year were asking, like, how can education change the world? What do I need to do in my school? Versus like, how do we get the maximum marks to be at the top of the chart, you know, to get our kids the most competitive opportunities? And I think that's a very beautiful shift that will lead to really a reshaped society if we're able to embrace that vision of education.
I think amen to that. And no wonder Lakshmi called me just before the session to tell you that how special you are and all the incredible work that you're doing. You know, she said she's the most special person. Just tell her that and the incredible work that you're doing, because the thought process that you come with, it is touching each aspect, you know, from us to taking it on, creating communities, taking it on to the world, creating a world which is better than, you know, where we found it and we are going to leave it with. I think if every person of us does little bit of, you know, a little bit of each, I would say that we are arriving somewhere. But thank you for whatever you are doing. I wanted to, of course, from this question come to, you know, the Teach India program, so to say. And I know that there is a beautiful program first in place of the fellowship program that you have. And even better is what they are doing today after graduating from the fellowship program, so to say. So tell us a little bit more about that. And what is something that, is there a criteria to join? Is any age matter? Let's start from start again.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. So it's a two-part model, as you shared. Fellowship is part one and the alumni movement is part two. The fellowship is a 2-year paid opportunity that people apply for. Generally speaking, younger people apply, but it's open to all ages. This year we have someone in their 60s in the fellowship as well. You know, the criteria are you need to really be passionate about education, children, wanting to make a change in India, and you need to have demonstrated leadership in some way. It could be excelling in academics. It could be that you were a fantastic like sports person, you know, so demonstrated leadership. And then we look for a range of soft skills that will make you a good teacher, but also we're betting that people that get into the program are not just good teachers, but become long-term leaders for education. So it's quite a selective program. We select about 5 to 7% of people that apply to the program. We get more than 20, 30,000 applications to the program every year. And then once you get selected, you come into our training institute. This is a residential 4 to 6 week space where we really get our fellows together to learn pedagogy, content. They spend time in communities. They understand the purpose of education. They really learn how to be a strong beginning teacher. And then once they finish their institute, they get placed in one of 8 cities, which are placement sites, and they become full-time teachers for 2 years. But it's 2 years of teaching and 2 years of leadership development at the same time. So that's sort of the fellowship. And what they're aiming to do in the fellowship is to grow as leaders themselves while they serve their children and really transform the lives of children in their classroom. So in many ways, think of it, Archana, as like a alternative MBA program where you're getting paid, you're having a chance to change the nation through your classroom, but you're also growing as a leader in unprecedented ways. So that's part one. And then part two, which you talked about a little bit earlier as well, the alumni movement. So the idea is that after the 2 years, the vast majority of our fellows stay in the education and the social sector, and continue to work full time in careers, different careers, but focusing on India's development issues and specifically the crisis in education. So today we have 5,300 fellow alumni who've taught for 2 years and now they're in the alumni movement. And the multiplier is incredible. So these 5,300 are now transforming the lives of 100,000 children. They're reaching more than 50 million children across the country because they're working at all levels of the system. So to give you an example, we have alums working with government today on large-scale foundational literacy programs. We have alums redesigning assessments, curriculums, textbooks. We have alums continuing to work in classrooms, alums running chains of schools. So they're working at all these levels of the system, and they're starting to work really collectively together. And that is what feels very, very encouraging and exciting, that the relationships between them are so strong because they've had that 2-year experience, that they start to work together. And as we know, like, our problems are way too big in India that any individual is not going to make a difference. We have to start working collectively together on some of these issues.
Oh, lovely. The thing that you're working on also requires a mindset change, not only for people who come and teach, because it's a big transition for them as well, but more so the work in the communities. And, I, of course, I have a small NGO of my own, and to even change the mindset of a few people, I can tell you I'm really struggling with sometimes, and I feel like running away sometimes to say, I'm not able to do it. I want to give up. So, how did you really stay on? You also talk about educating with love. Talk a little bit more about it and tell us if we want to start doing something on an individual level in the beginning, how do you really maneuver and make it possible like you?
Yeah, I mean, it's also such a big question. I think one is like my own, and this is not meant as advice, because I think each of us will go on our own journey. But from my own experience, I think, like, just take the first step is what I did. And I think sometimes there's a lot of pressure in today's world that you have to, like, know your vision, you have to have a strategy, it has to all be, part of a great PowerPoint deck that you, and like, my experience was very different. My experience was, if you have an intention that manifests in your heart, just take the first step. And I think if you do that with sincerity and with belief, there are people who will naturally gravitate around you to support you. So my first thing would be, if you want to do anything, you feel passionate about anything, just don't overthink it, because I think sometimes when we overthink it, we think too much of the risks and then we end up not taking that step. But just take that step. And I think the other thing is, like, I actually didn't want to start something on my own. I wanted to join something, but I couldn't find something at that time. Today, there are so many opportunities. So I feel like if you're unsure about starting something on your own, don't get too caught up with the idea that starting something is that great. Just find a place where you can work, build the skills. Like, I really feel I wish I had had more skills when I started. I feel like I would have been able to, like, I think we made the same progress at Teach for India that I did while I was at Akanksha in like a tenth of the time, because I had more skills. So I would say really focus on building the skills. Like, don't focus on the wrong things. Like, I'm seeing in the chat also, like, questions around like recognition, and I think those things matter, but not really when you start. I think if you're focusing on those things in the beginning, you lose your way a little bit. Whereas if you're just focusing on, do I know why I'm doing what I'm doing? Like, for me, I really wanted to unleash the potential of kids. Like, I really believed that. And then I was very like even today, I'm a very curious learner, you know, like I always feel I'm ill-equipped for the job I'm doing, even today after 35 years. Like it's so hard, this work, that I think my other like thing to think about would be just be committed to learning all the time. Like have that belief and purpose and then be committed to learning. And if I were to add one more, I think one thing I learned to do really well is ask for help.
Oh,
Like
wow.
you know, I sometimes like joke and feel like I'm just like a professional beggar because like my whole life has just been asking people for help. Like right from when I was 18, asking college students to volunteer, to asking for money, asking for learning, but just I think just shamelessly ask for help, because when you ask, people step up and give you the help that you need. And I feel I've had so much support to reach where you know, TFI has reached today. And it's only been because we just asked for help, been open to learning, been very transparent about all of our mistakes, been very vulnerable about the areas that we need help with. And that has really helped.
Yeah, I think that is the real powerful lesson that has come out. And what a wonderful advice. I think one of our people who have joined in also has said something what that you're really wonderful in, sharing also authentically more than anything. I think that's what we need to do. And women are not tuned in to ask anyway. We are tuned in to give more. So there's a lot of transition, like I was talking about the
Yeah.
mindset in the beginning. So it's a lot of tuning in as well, to say,
Yeah.
can I ask? I'm only meant to give.
Yeah. And no, I'll just add one thing to that, Archana. I do
Yeah.
think one thing I'm again learning slowly over time is just to be much more aware of all the social conditioning that ends up being blind spots for me, you, all of us, especially women. We've been so conditioned to think of our role in a particular way. And I think what you said is really beautiful and very true. Like, we're not conditioned to taking for ourselves, you know. We're conditioned to being the people that have to give all the time and not receive. And how can we just sit with, just be more aware of all of that conditioning? You know, like if a woman is ambitious, it's seen as something negative still. If a man is ambitious, it's seen as something positive. If a woman's out working, like she's like, you know, compromising her family, whereas a man doing that isn't. So I think just being aware of some of that conditioning that we've grown up with feels really important in this work. I think for many years, I felt a lot of guilt because of that conditioning. And it's been a real journey to say, like, why? Like, you know, let me let go of that guilt. I don't need to be a superwoman either at work or at home. I'm just human. I can make mistakes. I'm, you know, doing both things, work and home, is hard, and it
Yeah.
is a balance, and it's never going to be 100% right. I think accepting that was extremely helpful to me.
Yeah. So can you share something from your childhood, which is probably a memory that stayed with you, which inculcated stuff like this? Maybe you saw something, I don't know if it is home or peers or society, that you must do something about it, whether it is children or education or women today. Something.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, no, thank you for that, because I feel like for the women listening also who have children, like one of the things I strongly think shaped me was just early experiences volunteering.
Yeah.
And I think just being with children, seeing kids that were very different from me and the opportunities that they had had shaped my sense of purpose probably more than anything else. And it's very different to read about a problem or see statistics in research and actually know a child who's struggling and hear their story directly. So I think volunteering for me was a huge formative experience, and every summer I would volunteer. I volunteered with autistic children, with visually impaired kids, with I volunteered at an orphanage. So I just had like a lot of exposure to the kinds of challenges that children faced, which made me as a child myself feel like, wait, something's wrong in the world. how is it possible that I'm in a school where people are talking about what car their parents are going to buy them, and other children are struggling with basics? So that was one. I think the second, interestingly, childhood memories that come to my mind are around animals. So I I have many wonderful childhood memories with animals. And one of the sweetest that I have is my brother and I used to have a clubhouse in our garden, and we put up signs saying no adults allowed, no adults allowed. And we would basically pick up hurt animals from the street and nurse them back to health and then find homes for them. So I think I've learned a lot over time from animals. And from pets, and just the unconditionality that they have for you, the kind of love, the lack of expectations, how they cope with the challenges in their life. If you see a hurt animal, their ability to adapt. I learned a lot, I think, from animals and children growing up.
Mm. So beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And sometimes we don't, I think we don't become so aware to what are we really learning from, things around us and animals or plants or human beings. And then we just, I think, take life for granted. You're building it step by step, but there's also in this world where we are doing something for the larger good or the larger cause, there is a lot that goes on inside us. And of course, we do need a lot of, unconditioning, healing, or coming out of it and telling ourselves how we can cope up with all this and make it better. So, what are some coping mechanisms that you're using, or how are you healing yourself every day?
Yeah. No, thanks for that question. I mean, I think the things that help me, I think the biggest thing is community. I think a few years ago, I got introduced to this concept by, I go to Ahmedabad quite often to a community called Manav Sadhana. It's a community that tries to just serve with love. It's a beautiful community. Um, and actually, for any women interested, look up the website because they have programs and it's all free of cost, and it's some of the most beautiful formative programs. But I got introduced there to this concept of noble friends, and I didn't quite understand it at the time. But noble friends are people that will walk the path with you. They don't need to be people who you meet every single day in your life, but they are your friends who over time are trying to serve the world in their own way. And they are there for you to challenge you, inspire you. And I think I feel very blessed to have invested very early on, very organically and naturally in relationships with people who today are my noble friends. Like they're walking the path with me. And so even in my most difficult times, professionally, personally, I've never felt alone. And I think that's a big part of healing for me, just having that community. I think the second is just like daily practices I've come to realize are just so important, creating that space to pause, how you start your morning, how you end your day, those few minutes in whatever way. It could be meditation, could be journaling, could just be sitting and talking to somebody, but to reflect and make meaning of your day, to pause, not to have your mind be like 500 steps ahead, worrying about the future all the time, like conflicting thoughts in your head, but just spaces to learn to calm your mind. Like I've actually realized that as I've got more responsibility in work, I've become happier, interestingly. Like, the stresses are more, the responsibility is more. And yet the happiness, I think, comes from just the internal work. And it's still very much work in progress. And there are days where I feel overwhelmed and all of that for sure. But I think where I am better with the personal practices, going to the gym, having time with my dogs in the morning to, ending my day quietly. Those personal practices really help a lot as well. And then the third that I'll add is just being gentle with yourself. I think this was a big learning for me over time. I think as a young person, I was very harsh on myself. And the reason why was because I felt if I'm not harsh on myself, I'm not going to get better. And I think over time, I realized the opposite is true. when you are gentle, you love yourself, accept yourself today, like really think your whole today, then you get the energy to work on yourself and become better and better each day. And so just like now I tell all the Teach for India fellows too, when I meet them, I'm like, the work is hard. Just be gentle with yourself, and only if you are gentle with yourself will the world actually be gentle with you, is what I've come to experience for myself. So yeah, these are just a few thoughts.
This is really awesome. And thank you for saying it loudly, because another thing that women just don't do is self-care and self-love. We are always self-doubting ourselves. And so there is so much work that we need to do for ourselves. And it all starts with loving ourselves. There's a question which is here, and I think it is a kind of like the extension to the stuff that we are talking about, that she's recently lost a job and she's feeling very lost, and she's a single parent, and she wants some kind of a tip from you to say how should she hold on, what should she do really to make it better for herself.
Yeah. I mean, firstly, Priyanka, thank you for sharing that, sending you lots of love. I was a single parent myself, so I actually got divorced when I was expecting my first baby. So I hear you. I think again, like some of the same things I've said, just be gentle with yourself. Know that like this time is going to pass. I think now looking back, I feel so grateful for that period in my life. I think it changed my life in really wonderful ways. And what helped me doesn't help everybody, but what helped me at that time was actually depending a lot on my work. I found a lot of stability in my work when there was a lot of instability in my personal life. And so that would be one recommendation. Like really try to identify something to keep yourself busy, that you love doing. And also I think hobbies have helped me a lot. So I've always had something that I've been trying to cultivate outside of work. I'm very passionate about the arts and music. So at times in my life, it's been the piano, now it's painting. So something which is an outlet for you as well, a creative outlet, that also is very helpful.
Yeah. Priyanka, I hope that you got your answer. And again, Shaheen, it's not that everybody comes here and shares their heart out, and I really acknowledge and appreciate that, really. And yeah, continue to do what you're doing and touch many lives. You have a RISE program, which also Lakshmi wanted me to ask you about that, and especially when children are the focus of everything that you do. Talk a little bit more, and then we can ask something on technology that somebody wants to ask from here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know actually the details of that particular program because we run so many different programs for our kids, but the intention of the RISE program is to support children who are higher potential kids in their future lives. And I think they get mentors and a bunch of different things. So we actually have programs for kids at different who have different abilities, different levels of readiness, and RISE is for some of our higher performing kids. What was the second part of it? The tech question.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I love that question. I mean, this is like we are obsessively like asking ourselves how AI is gonna fundamentally disrupt education and what the implications are on us as an organization, but much more broadly on the education sector. I think if we're not asking the question, like we're going to become irrelevant. I'm very convinced about that. So thank you for the question. My sense is that teachers are not replaceable by technology because education is much more than just about content. But I think technology is going to be a huge disruptor in how we get kids to access content, in how personalized learning can be, and as a tool for our teachers. So for example, we're just piloting right now an AI tool that we've developed, which is a teaching assistant. And it's a chat bot, and you can ask it, like fellows can ask it anything in the world, like how to plan a lesson, how to deal with classroom management, and it will actually give you an answer based on like all of the knowledge we fed into it. So I think AI is going to like, yeah, fundamentally change the way we teach. We're using it a lot right now for lesson planning as well. It is most times planning stronger lessons than beginning teachers. But
Wow.
I think we're at very early stages of asking that question, upskilling our own organization on AI awareness, how to use AI, how to create AI tools. That's the sort of phase that we're in right now.
So thank you for answering that. And somebody is asking here, do you do anything for special children or educating in the special?
Yeah, no, thanks, Pradya, for that. We actually don't, because we place in existing government schools, so we don't choose our children. We choose schools and then we work with mainstream schools. As you can imagine, a high percentage of our kids in these classrooms end up being kids with a range of special needs. What we do is we partner with organizations in the 8 cities that we work in on things like diagnosis and getting support to our fellows as to how to be as equipped as they can possibly be to make accommodations for those children. But I think the truth is it's grossly inadequate, what we're doing. And I think the reason for that is we work with first and second year teachers who are very overwhelmed. They often have classes of 40, 50, 60 children who are many grade levels behind. So special needs becomes one of many things that they are focusing on. We don't have dedicated special needs teachers. Also, the schools we place in are very ill-equipped. So we're trying our best to support children, make accommodations, work with partners in our cities, but a lot more needs to be done within Teach for India and of course in the broader ecosystem as well.
Great. So that gets me to this question about working in India as an NGO. Of course, I'm sure that there are lots of new challenges you face quite often. So, do you want to talk a little bit about if one is wanting to be in this space, what are some learnings that can come from your life, which we can?
Yeah. I mean, firstly, if you want to be in the space, come into the space. That's my first thing, because we just need more people who are talented and passionate in the space for sure. And when I say space, I mean across the development sector. I think, 35 years ago when I started my work, there was like nobody who was like choosing to, in an aspirational way, to enter the space. And I think today it's very different. There are fantastic organizations. Of course, there is a salary difference. And at the same time, you can earn a pretty good living and be in the sector as well. So I think that's been a big change as well. I think the level of purpose that you have in the sector, the amount of learning that you have, and the community that you become a part of, those are all, I think, reasons to be in the sector. I think today you can also, like, with AI especially, like, go and prompt it, tell it your interests. It'll generate a list of organizations for you to start looking at. My recommendation would be, if you're thinking about it, but you're not sure, just go and volunteer or, work with an organization for a few years, like really understand whether this is what you want to do before you jump in. But there are many, many opportunities. And of course, the Teach for India Fellowship is one great way to explore the sector, because even if you're not long-term, you don't want to be in education, I think being in a classroom in a government school, you understand so many of India's challenges, because in your classroom, you will see parents who are unemployed, you'll see mental health issues, you'll see abuse of different kinds, you'll see violence, you'll see learning gaps, all of this. And 2 years of being on the ground is a really strong starting point to understand what you want to do in the sector as well.
So nicely put. And this also shows that, the more work you do, the more space it gets created to do more and more of it. There is no dearth of working in different aspects. Education to start with, and then there's sanitation, there's health, there is infrastructure, there is community development, and of course, skilling, and it goes on. Do you see a change from where you started to where India is becoming in the sector as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think today it's just there's so many bright young people who have so many opportunities to join any sector who are choosing to be in the sector. I think that's a massive difference. And I just feel like so lucky um, because of the people that I work with. And these are people who could have chosen to do anything, but have chosen to focus on these issues. So I think there's a very, very big difference in multiple ways. And amongst them, you know, what I mentioned before, Archana, that today you can like, yes, you're not going to earn the same as in the corporate sector, but you can live a good life, you can have a strong community, you can do purposeful work, you can continue to learn and grow in the sector in ways that I think were very different historically, where, you know, it was a more service oriented sector earlier. You had to make big sacrifices to do it. Today, it's a much more professional sector. You're held to outcomes, like a lot of corporate practices have made their way into the sector as well.
Yeah. What is that one thing that stands out for you? Some anecdote, one story that really stays in your heart while you're working 35 years? I'm sure there are many, but
Yeah.
shares if
This
you.
is like an impossible question. And so I'm just going to talk about something that happened yesterday because,
Oh, okay,
you
that's
know,
good.
this is the kind of work where like you get inspired 10 times every day. So you can never choose one. But I met a student actually a day before yesterday. I met a student called Safura. She's 13 years old. She was in a Teach for India classroom. Um, and she last night sent me a book she has written. So this child basically, she started out by developing an AI app because she said chatbots are making kids stupider because what they're doing is they're giving kids answers. So she created a chatbot that would ask kids questions to get
Oh,
them to find the answers. Then she realized, she was about 11 when she did this. Then she realized that that's not right either because so many kids don't have access to technology, and she wanted to do something for all kids. So she's now written a book and done a talk, which she sent me, which I mean, it would be great for you to interview her at some point.
yeah.
Archana, she is a force of nature. But her new concept is that leadership and education so leaders are, we have the wrong leaders because they got the wrong education, and we have the wrong education system because we have the wrong leaders. And so how do you create programs that build leadership in kids? And this is her new initiative, and she's written like a 10 chapter book that I just finished reading last night that she sent me, and she's 13 years old. I think I could give you many examples like that, but I think when we elevate the potential of our young people. And it was interesting because I wrote back to her, I said, what did your teachers do that helped you become this like empowered young woman? And she said, you know, she didn't say very great things. She said, they gave me safe space. They encouraged me. They answered all my questions patiently, even my stupid questions. They never made me feel small. And she said, because of feeling safe, feeling held, feeling like I had someone's attention, I was able to develop. And I feel like for all of us, like on this call and beyond, like, why can't we just do that as human beings for each other? You know, like just suspend our judgment, believe in people, hold safe space, accept differences. Like, I think all of us would just shine so much more if we were just present and respectful of each other and supportive. And this is something I've heard again and again from children, that like the hardest thing for them was actually not their challenges. The hardest thing was the judgment that they have faced from others. And so what does it mean for all of us to just suspend judgment and see people kindly and gently?
I think very beautiful. And I think the questions will keep coming, but I think we are out of time. So I want to just leave everybody with one thing that you want women to know who've joined in, and women who couldn't join in, of course. But what is that one message that goes out for them?
I think the one thing I've been thinking more about than anything else is just what it means to live our lives with love, and love in every way, like starting with ourselves. Can we love ourselves? Can we love our work? Can we love each other? Can we love, in my case, the children we work with? And really not love as a fluffy concept, but in small actions, and asking ourselves, what does it mean in a difficult conversation to respond with love? What does it mean when I feel overstretched to treat myself with love? What does it mean when a colleague needs something to reach out to them with love? And I think if we just hold that question, what does it mean to lead with love, our lives become much more meaningful.
This was a very therapeutic session, you have to know, because there's so much which came out, and I think you've spread so much love already. So thank you, Shaheen. It was commendable. And I hope
Thank
everybody
you.
who joined in took away lots from this session, like I did. So,
Thank you, Archana.
so
Really
yeah, another
appreciate
time.
it. Thank you. Lots of love to everybody.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.